For my vlog today, I'm going to read through what I have for my current chapter of my story and try and figure out and explore ab-libbly what I'm going to do next with it. Because I need to get back into motor writing. It's something that I am struggling with right now. And it's really fucking annoying. Also, I need to look at the camera. Well, that's going to be hard in a second because I'm going to be reading off the screen. I guess I can't always do it. But when I'm addressing you, I'm going to try and do it. Alright. I'm working on three things at the moment. I'm working on autobiography, which is like a self-helpy type thing. It's interesting to explore that stuff. It digs up old memories and it has a cool. It's really easy to write stuff from memory too, so it's a great way to like do a warm up for writing because you just sit there and go blah, 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 once you think of a thing. It's easy. It doesn't actually take any mental energy compared to writing fiction or something like that, or writing something with a structured intention for someone else to read. Because then you start to be careful with your wording. But that's the enemy. Even with fiction writing, you don't want to be careful with your wording because you're writing a first draft. If you're editing, sure. I'm going to have to go over that later. But, excuse me, with the first draft, you just need to get it done. And when you've got it done, then you go back and do this kind of thing, like reread it and edit it. That's something I've been doing to try and get in the mode. Reread what I have, and then just get back into the flow of it because you've got to reactivate it. Writing isn't as natural to me as it is with like other creative things like drawing. I think it's a more complex task, and maybe I'm less confident in it because I can't. With drawing, I can just see that when I'm doing good and when I'm doing bad, and I'm all right. I'm a pretty good artist, and I've had a lot of reinforcement with other people telling me such. Whereas writing, though, you can't just show someone you're writing, and in 5 seconds, and then go ooh or ew. With writing, it's an investment of time, and I want to write novels, so I don't write a lot of short stories, which I should be doing. Might do a segment on this. I was thinking just short stories or something like that, and I'll present them through this because that could be cool. But I'll leave that for later. Today, I'm going to read what I currently have with this story that I'm calling tentatively. I think I'm going to have to rename it. It's a little bit sort of a bold. It's called The Birth of God. The first chapter is very nonsensical compared to the first chapter doesn't have a chapter. It deliberately left it out. And the story started off with like this wide view of this character, of this being coming into consciousness from nothing and then trying to figure itself out with no point of reference because it's the only thing that exists. And its own thoughts become semi-sentient unto themselves, and it has this destructuralization of itself happen. And its mind becomes a city, and it realizes that it is the city, and each of the individual thoughts that it has have their own sort of lives, but they are still elements and extensions of it. And then it abruptly goes to a different point of view character, which is one of those thoughts, and their life. They're an academic struggling with their own place in this city, and they're pretty angry about the state of the world. They don't remember the larger being because the thoughts don't know, just like your thoughts, they don't know their element of you, their individual thoughts, and they just don't think about your whole brain or all the other thoughts going on. They're their own thing, just like a person in a society. You're not always thinking about the society. Pretty heady concept. My other story is about a junkie trying to slay a dragon. Junkie's a bad word, I don't really like that. A young stoner lad trying to slay a dragon, but he is bad at it. That one's a lot funner. This one is a little more heady. And they're just two halves of myself, I guess. The two things. This one's a lot more neutral toned. On chapter 2. At this point, the guy he had a conversation with a girl he likes who runs a bakery or something, and he had some kind of outburst, made himself look like a shithead. And at this point in the story, thematically speaking, he is a shithead. I think he refuses to take responsibility for his own life, and he needs to learn to take responsibility that you have control over your world and yourself. So he's very obsessed he's angry at the gods, who I think are just like a more like complex series of thoughts within this hierarchy of this city being sort of thing, and they run the society. seemingly. But by the end of the story, he's going to realise that the gods are made up of smaller thoughts. That it's made up of them. So his thoughts do impact the larger whole, and he can't just blame the whole and sit there and not do anything and expect things to change. But at this point, he's frustrated with the world. He blames everyone else, and he's an academic of some kind. And he's going to attend some talk with this lady who has written a book that was pretty influential in the past, but she has since changed her mind about where she stood, and he is angry about that. So chapter 2, on the subject of gods. My earliest memory was of my mother overdosing in our living room, said Professor Becker. This is the old lady. He also met her on the bus or something like that and didn't recognise her. I was already struggling to synthesize the contradictory characters of this little old lady on the bus and of Professor Becker, and I had to factor in traumatized child as well. She survived. This is quotation marks. She survived, but that experience stayed with me, and it didn't stop her using. What's worse is the string of horrible men she brought in and out of our lives, which fostered a deep anger within me as my thoughts crystallized into my mind. Fortunately for me, that mind was also sharp, and so I managed to do well enough at school, even though I moved out at 15 to win a scholarship which enabled me to attend university. I studied communication information because I wanted the truth of the world. I wanted to uncover it and expose it. My childhood had me resenting authority deeply, and I had to come to find, through the lens of anger and hate, that this world was riddled with deception and lies, woven by people in power to benefit them. And the gods atop the mountains were the highest authority, so my resentment often strayed to them, and over time that reinforced itself. This world was awful, and the people in it. How could these so-called gods allow that to be? They were either incompetent or malevolent, and I was banking on both. I nodded along with all of this. Professor Becker's writings had been instrumental in helping me to see these truths in the world, casting a spotlight on the misdeeds and corruptions of the gods. As a student, my anger became a hobby, she continued. I cultivated it. I became something of an activist, as students are wont to do, attending protests, putting up signs, and meeting up with like-minded fellows. And now I've caught up. So, what do I do from here as far as the plan goes? She's going to keep talking. As a student, my anger became beliefs. I got well into this belief system, and it became an extension of who I am. Or who I was. I finished my studies, and I became a journalist, and a writer, and an investigative journalist. So I just paused and I did a fuck ton of writing. In terms of what this video is now then. So that chapter, she went on to say, speaking in very loose terms about how she became a journalist, how she published some book being really angry at the gods of their world, and how now she really regrets that book, while the hero is quite upset at her saying that because that book changed his life. So her now renouncing it he's gonna chuck a shit by the end of this chapter, but she's still talking about her interview with like one of the main gods, and this is the changing moment in her life. Problem writing wise, I don't think it's too interesting. That's probably why I'm struggling for this chapter to some degree. If it was direct dialogue, like actually the scene of her talking to the god, that might be more interesting. But I'm just going to stick with it. I'm going to write it as is, and I can fix that and edit, or clean that up in some form, find some way to make it a bit better. As long as the chapter's short, it won't really matter that it's a bit dull, and I can make the other part, the interesting part, the conflict between her and the hero. So yeah, that's my writing session today. Halfway through chapter 3. But really I've called it chapter 2 because the first chapter is a prologue, essentially. Don't know what I'm going to call it. I think the overall direction of the story is going to be very quasi-spiritual sort of thing. It's about, like, I'm not a spiritual person, but I find mythology fascinating, and I have been. I mean, this arises from probably the closest thing to my own spirituality. If I was to be a spiritual person, I would be a pantheist. I believe that we are, if anything, all extensions of the same thing. And that's what this is. I think he's going to chuck a shit at this character, get fired for it because he's been getting in shit for a while. The bulk of this society really like the gods, but he wants to disprove that. I don't think she's right either. They're sort of saying that, because her conclusion is going to be that what they do, they need to trust the gods because the gods are good. So she's talking about it. She's making an argument of faith, but I want his argument not to be about that exactly, but like tangential to that, like a better application of that is that faith in yourself, in that you have to be proactive in the world. Because he realizes, probably through interaction with gods that he actually meets, I think the buddy of the story will be like a demigod that he befriends and then doesn't know they're a demigod at first, perhaps, and then realizes it and then chucks a shit. This story could probably do really well for switching perspectives, because technically it's from the perspective of the being of the city, who is everyone. So I could switch perspectives and then even have some bleed. I want an impressionistic feel overall. This video is going a bit longer than usual. Point being, yeah, I'll do more brainstorming videos like this. They're a little bit loose than the other ones, but I need to practice this stuff, I guess. Thank you.